Lily had always thought of her life as perfect. The kind of perfect that people envied from the outside. She was married to a man she loved deeply, a man who, for all intents and purposes, seemed to love her just as much. They had 2 beautiful children, a lovely house in the suburbs, and a steady life that many others would dream of. They had been together for nearly 10 years, and it felt like the foundation of their love was unshakable. Every morning, she woke up early to prepare breakfast for her family. As her husband, James, was getting ready for work, she'd make his favorite coffee, a little extra sugar and milk, just the way he liked it. Her children, ages 5 and 7, always rushed to the kitchen to grab their pancakes, fighting over the last piece of bacon. It was chaotic, yes, but it was their kind of chaos, the kind that felt comforting. Lily had always been the type of person who believed in the idea of forever. She believed in loyalty, trust, and the kind of love that stood the test of time. And for her, James embodied everything she thought she could ever need. He was funny, charming, and kind. He'd always been there for her, whether it was a late-night talk after a tough day at work or making sure she felt safe and loved when the world outside was too harsh. There were no signs of trouble in their marriage, no reason to doubt anything. James worked long hours as an architect, and Lily, though a stay-at-home mom, filled her days with various projects, running the house, organizing playdates for their kids, making sure everything was in order. Her life revolved around her family, and she never questioned that her love and dedication would be returned in full. It was an ordinary Tuesday when the first crack appeared, but at the time, Lily didn't know how to recognize it. She had picked up James' phone by mistake while looking for hers. She needed to check the time because she was running late for a dentist appointment with their son, but what she saw stopped her heart. A text message popped up on the screen from a contact named Anna. It was a simple message, yet it stung in a way Lily couldn't explain. "I miss you, babe. Let's meet up soon." Lily's stomach dropped. She knew something was off, but she quickly brushed it aside, assuming it was some sort of misunderstanding. Maybe it's a work contact, she thought. After all, James was always so busy, and sometimes he'd be distracted by work messages that had nothing to do with their relationship. But the thought didn't sit right with her. Lily couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that began to churn in her gut. She waited for him to return home later that evening, thinking perhaps she was overreacting. Maybe he had a good reason for the strange message. That night, as they sat down to dinner, she found herself distracted, her mind swirling with questions. Was there something going on? Why hadn't he mentioned this Anna before? But she said nothing. It was as though she was afraid that if she asked, the perfect image of her life would crumble before her eyes. "How was your day?" she asked casually, trying to sound like everything was normal. James smiled, as he always did, his eyes lighting up as he spoke about the latest project he was working on. His voice was warm, affectionate, everything that made her believe he was still the same man she had married all those years ago. But beneath it, there was an odd tension in the air, one she couldn't place. Lily's mind raced, her emotions at war with each other. She wanted to confront him, to ask him about the message, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. She feared what she might find, what might come of it. She feared losing him. Losing everything. That night, as they lay in bed, Lily tried to push the thoughts out of her head. She told herself that it was just a fluke, that maybe she had read too much into it. After all, why would James betray her? They had built a life together, one that seemed unbreakable. They had children, a home. She loved him, and he loved her. But deep inside, there was a whisper that she couldn't ignore. Something was wrong. Still, Lily clung to the belief that their life was perfect, that there couldn't be anything lurking beneath the surface. She wanted to believe that nothing had changed, that her world wasn't as fragile as it seemed. And for the time being, she pushed the doubts aside, hoping they would disappear, just like they always had before. The following days after Lily found that message on James' phone were like walking through fog. Her mind raced at a speed she couldn't control. She tried to convince herself that she was being paranoid. Maybe it's nothing, she repeated to herself over and over. Maybe it's just a mistake, a misunderstanding. But each time she tried to shake off the feeling, the image of that message, the simple, affectionate words from Anna, haunted her. There was no escaping it. The doubt started to fester and grow. Lily began to notice small changes in James' behavior, the extra hours he was staying at work, the long, quiet stretches of time when he was home, his phone constantly face down on the kitchen counter when they were together. It was subtle, but the signs were there. She knew it, even if she didn't want to acknowledge it. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, Lily decided she couldn't live in this uncertainty anymore. She had to confront him. She had to know the truth, even if it shattered everything. "James," Lily said, her voice shaking as she sat across from him at the kitchen table. He looked up from his phone, sensing the tension in the air. He could tell something was wrong. "What is it, honey?" James asked, his tone soft, almost too soft. A subtle smile played at the corner of his lips, but it felt wrong. It felt like a mask. Lily took a deep breath. "I need to know about Anna," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Who is she?" James froze. For a moment, he didn't speak. His smile faded, and Lily could see the hesitation in his eyes. But it wasn't guilt, it was more like fear. Fear of being found out. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, trying to dismiss her concerns with a wave of his hand. Lily didn't let it go. "The text message. The one from Anna. I saw it on your phone. I miss you, babe. Let's meet up soon." James went silent, and for the first time, Lily saw something in his eyes that she'd never seen before, guilt, maybe even shame, but also a sense of coldness she hadn't expected. "I don't know why she sent that," James said, his voice calm now, almost too calm. "It's nothing. Just someone from work." Lily felt a wave of frustration crash over her. She knew it wasn't nothing. She knew it wasn't some random coworker, but she couldn't quite bring herself to say it aloud. She couldn't bear to face the truth. "So, this is what it's come to. Lying to me." Her voice broke, but she held herself together as best as she could. "I'm not lying, Lily," James said, his voice cool and dismissive. "You're overreacting. I've been working late. You know how it is. We've been busy." Lily wanted to scream. She wanted to shake him, demand that he tell her the truth, but instead, she just sat there, frozen in place. His words didn't make sense to her anymore. They felt empty, hollow. The man she had once trusted with everything was now spinning stories she couldn't believe. "James, I'm not stupid," she said, her voice barely a whisper now. "I see what's happening. I see the way you're avoiding me. The way you won't look me in the eye anymore. I know you're lying to me." For a long moment, James didn't say anything. He just stared at her, as if calculating his next move. Lily could see that he wasn't going to give her the truth. And deep down, she knew it wasn't about one text message anymore. This was bigger. This was about something she had been blind to for months, maybe even longer. Finally, James sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Fine," he said. "If you really want to know the truth, yeah, I've been seeing someone else. It's been going on for a while now." The words hit Lily like a slap to the face. She felt her chest tighten, her breath catch in her throat. She couldn't speak. The world around her blurred, and for a moment, she thought she might collapse right there. James looked at her, his face softening, though there was no real remorse in his eyes. "I didn't want to hurt you, Lily. But I can't keep pretending like everything's fine. I'm sorry, but I don't feel the same way about you anymore. I don't love you the way I used to." Lily couldn't process what he was saying. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under her. All the years they had spent together, all the memories, all the love, everything was suddenly irrelevant. He didn't love her anymore. Her heart shattered, but something deeper, something darker, began to rise within her, a desperate fear. Fear of losing him. Fear of being alone. "I can fix this," she said, her voice trembling. "We can work through this. Please, James. I don't want to lose you. Please, let me try. I'll change. I'll do anything." James didn't respond immediately. Instead, he glanced away, his expression hardening. "You can't change this, Lily. I'm done. It's over." The words were like daggers, but Lily refused to give in. Her tears started to fall, but she wiped them away quickly, determined to hold herself together. She wasn't going to let him leave. She wasn't going to lose everything. The days that followed the confrontation were an emotional roller coaster for Lily. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't eat. Everything she had built her life around now felt like it was slipping through her fingers. Yet, despite the overwhelming pain and anger, she did what she had always done: she cared for him. She continued to wake up early every morning, preparing breakfast for James, making sure his clothes were laid out for work, just as she always had. Her heart ached with every gesture, every routine, but she couldn't stop herself. She couldn't bear the thought of losing him, not yet. James didn't change. He remained distant, emotionally checked out. At times, he barely spoke to her. He would come home late, sometimes smelling like perfume that wasn't hers, or spend more time on his phone than with their children. But Lily, in her heartache and confusion, convinced herself that if she kept showing him love and devotion, he would come back to her. It was foolish. It was desperate. But she couldn't help herself. She loved him, and for her, that was enough reason to keep fighting for him. She told herself that perhaps the affair was just a phase, that with time, he would realize how much he had to lose. So, she kept being the perfect wife, cooking his favorite meals, running the house, caring for their children as though nothing had changed. She wore the mask of normalcy every day, even when inside, she was dying. But beneath it all, there was an ache, a gnawing fear that she couldn't push away. The constant feeling that something was slipping through her fingers. She watched as James became colder and colder toward her, his once lovely smiles now mere courtesy, and his touch nothing more than mechanical. Yet still, Lily kept up the facade. She told herself that this was just temporary. If she gave him enough time, enough love, he would remember the man he used to be, the man she had married. She kept telling herself that if she was patient enough, everything would fall back into place. One night, after tucking their children into bed, she stood in front of the mirror, her reflection staring back at her with eyes filled with exhaustion. Her hair, once bright and full of life, now seemed dull. Her skin had lost its glow, and the dark circles under her eyes were more prominent than ever. She hadn't noticed how badly she had been neglecting herself until that moment. The toll of emotional exhaustion had crept up on her slowly, and it had consumed her. But she quickly pushed those thoughts away. She couldn't focus on herself. She needed to focus on James. He was still her husband, and she couldn't let him go, not after everything they had been through. The next morning, Lily made a conscious effort to show him more affection. She kissed him on the cheek as he walked out the door, hoping for even the smallest reaction. He didn't respond, but that didn't stop her. She went on, filling the space between them with her love and devotion, despite the growing divide. In her mind, if she just tried hard enough, things would go back to the way they were. She could fix it. She could fix him. A week later, Lily sat at the kitchen table, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared breakfast. James had come home late again the night before, and this time, he hadn't bothered to explain where he had been or what he had been doing. He just went straight to bed, leaving Lily to wonder if he was even still interested in saving their marriage. Her mind drifted to the few brief conversations they had had about the affair. Each time, James claimed he was sorry, but his words never seemed to have the weight Lily needed. She asked him, "Are you still seeing her?" But every time he responded with the same deflection, "It's over, Lily. Please trust me." But deep down, Lily knew it wasn't over. He hadn't changed. He hadn't stopped seeing Anna. And worse, Lily could tell that the affection he once had for her was diminishing with each passing day. His eyes no longer sparkled when he looked at her. His voice didn't carry the warmth it once did. It was all fading, and yet, Lily couldn't stop trying. She couldn't bring herself to acknowledge the reality. The following weekend, when James was out running errands, Lily found herself sitting on the couch, flipping through old photo albums. She came across a picture of their wedding day, the day they had promised to love each other forever. It was so easy back then. She had been so sure of their future together. Tears welled up in her eyes as she traced her fingers over the image of them, both so young and hopeful. Now, she felt like a stranger in her own marriage, chasing something that had already slipped away. That night, she did what she had been doing for weeks now. She waited for him to come home, hoping he would turn to her, hoped that things would change. But as the hours passed, he still didn't come home on time. The dinner she had cooked was growing cold. The silence between them was now a gaping hole that no amount of affection could fill. When he finally walked in, she tried once again to reach out. "James," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Can we talk about this? About us?" He didn't respond right away. He set his keys down on the counter and walked past her without a word, heading straight to the living room to sit in front of the television. Lily felt a wave of coldness wash over her, but she forced herself to keep smiling. She couldn't show him how badly she was hurting. But inside, her heart shattered just a little bit more. As the weeks went on, Lily found herself trapped in a cycle of self-deception. She couldn't escape the feelings of hurt, but she also couldn't let go of the hope that things might change. Every day, she told herself that she could fix everything, if she just loved him enough, if she just gave him more time, more care, more patience. She couldn't imagine her life without him, and the thought of their family falling apart was simply too painful to bear. It had become almost unbearable. The lies James told seemed to pile up, and his coldness was growing more apparent with each passing day. But Lily refused to accept it. She couldn't bring herself to confront the truth, to face the harsh reality that maybe, just maybe, James was never going to come back to her, at least not in the way she needed. The facade she wore every day, of the loving, devoted wife, was beginning to crack. She had stopped going out with friends, stopped taking care of herself. Her world had become smaller, consumed by her need to fix her marriage. When her friends would call to check in, asking why she seemed so distant, she would brush them off with excuses, "Oh, just busy with the kids," or "Things are good, just a little hectic." But inside, she was breaking. The smile she forced when she saw James was no longer genuine. The soft laughter they used to share was a distant memory, replaced by awkward silences and uncomfortable glances. They spoke less and less, and when they did, it was always about logistics, about bills, about the children, about anything except what really mattered. One evening, after putting the children to bed, Lily sat alone in their bedroom, staring at the empty space beside her on the bed. James was still out. He had said he was going to meet a friend, but Lily had stopped asking where he was going. She already knew the answer, deep down. He wasn't with her. He wasn't with their family. The pain of the betrayal had become a constant ache in her chest, but she buried it, pretending that everything was fine. She couldn't bear to acknowledge that she was slowly losing the man she had once loved with everything she had. She thought about their wedding day, their vows. She thought about the promises they had made to each other. How could it all be so easily broken? She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. The vibrant woman she once was had faded, replaced by someone who was constantly on edge, someone consumed with fear and insecurity. Her hair was thinner, her skin paler. Her once bright eyes were now dull, haunted by thoughts of betrayal and a growing emptiness she couldn't fill. Still, she convinced herself that if she just kept loving James, he would eventually come back to her. If she just kept being the perfect wife, the perfect mother, things would go back to the way they used to be. But deep inside, Lily knew that this was a lie she had been telling herself. She had been ignoring the truth for so long, hoping that by continuing to give, she could somehow fix the damage that had already been done. One evening, after a particularly cold exchange with James, Lily sat in the kitchen, staring at the clock as the minutes ticked by. It was past midnight, and James still wasn't home. She had made his favorite dinner, hoping to rekindle something between them, but he hadn't come home for it. There had been no apology, no explanation. Just silence. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Anna, the woman who had torn her world apart. Lily hesitated for a moment before opening it. "Anna, I miss you so much. I can't wait to see you again soon. Love you." Lily's hands trembled as she stared at the screen. It was the third message like this in the past week. She had seen them before, but this one hit harder. Every word felt like a slap to her face. She had known it was happening, but seeing it in writing, hearing Anna's words, made it so much more real. It was the final confirmation that everything she had been trying to deny was true. He was gone. And yet, Lily couldn't bring herself to let go. She didn't want to face the truth. The truth that the man she loved had chosen someone else, that he no longer cared for her the way he once did. The tears started to fall then, but they weren't just tears of sadness. They were tears of frustration, of anger, of the unbearable weight of the life she had built around a lie. How had she not seen it? How had she allowed herself to be so blind to the man who had slowly become a stranger? But she wasn't ready to give up. She couldn't. As painful as it was, she still believed that if she just held on long enough, everything would get better. That belief was the last thread she had left. The weeks continued to drag on, each day feeling like an eternity for Lily. Her life, once full of hope and love, had become a series of empty routines. She had become a shell of the woman she once was, clinging desperately to a marriage that was slipping further away with each passing day. James, on the other hand, was more distant than ever, and the coldness in his eyes when he looked at her was like a knife twisting in her heart. One night, as she was cleaning up the kitchen after dinner, she heard the door open and James step inside. The familiar scent of cologne that had once been comforting now made her stomach churn. He didn't even look at her as he walked past, heading straight to the living room, where he sank into the couch, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. Lily stood frozen in the doorway of the kitchen, watching him. Her heart ached with the realization that they had become strangers. The man she had shared her life with was no longer the same, and no matter how much she tried to hold on, he was already gone. She gathered every ounce of courage she had left and walked into the living room. She stood in front of him, blocking the television with her body. James looked up at her with a look of mild annoyance, as though she were an inconvenience. "What's going on, Lily?" he asked in a bored tone. "I'm trying to relax." Her breath caught in her throat, but she pushed forward. "James, we need to talk. About everything." He sighed heavily, rolling his eyes. "Not this again. We've talked enough, haven't we?" Lily shook her head, her heart pounding in her chest. "No, we haven't. You've been lying to me for months, James. I know about Anna. I know you're still seeing her. And I know you've been taking money from our joint account." At this, James finally looked at her, but there was no guilt in his eyes, only irritation. "You really want to go down this road again?" he said, his voice sharp. "Fine. Yes, I'm seeing her. And yes, I've been taking money. I don't owe you any explanations. Lily felt the ground beneath her feet tremble. His words hit her like a tidal wave, sweeping away everything she thought she knew about their marriage. He had been stealing from her the money they had saved for their children's future, for their home, for their security. And he didn't even care. He was unapologetic. Her voice cracked as she tried to hold herself together. How could you do this to me? How could you do this to our family? James leaned back, clearly unfazed. You didn't give me what I needed, Lily. I'm not sorry. You've been so wrapped up in your perfect little world that you didn't even notice me slipping away. I couldn't keep pretending. The words felt like a slap to her face. Every part of her, every ounce of love and loyalty she had given him, was met with coldness and indifference. She felt a deep, aching emptiness inside her chest. This was the man she had spent years loving, the man she had sacrificed so much for. And now, he was standing before her, admitting to everything, and he wasn't even sorry. I want a divorce, James continued, his words cutting through the air like a blade. I'm leaving. I'm taking everything, including the money. I don't want anything to do with you anymore. Lily couldn't breathe. She felt her knees buckle beneath her, and she collapsed onto the couch beside him, her head spinning. No, please, don't do this, she whispered. I love you. I can fix this. I'll do anything. James didn't even look at her. It's too late for that. I've already made up my mind. Lily's heart shattered. She had been holding on to a dream, a hope that somehow things would get better. But now, the truth was undeniable. James was gone, emotionally, physically, and now, legally. He was leaving her, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. She stood up slowly, her hands trembling. Where will you go? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I'm moving in with Anna, he replied casually, as though it was no big deal. The words stung like salt in an open wound. It wasn't just the affair that had destroyed her, it was the complete disregard for everything they had shared, for the life they had built together. The betrayal felt deeper than she could have ever imagined. James stood up to leave, grabbing his things without a second glance. I'm done here, he said flatly. Take care of yourself, Lily. I'm sure you'll figure it out. And with that, he was gone. Lily stood in the middle of their living room, surrounded by the remnants of a life she had worked so hard to build. She could barely comprehend what had just happened. He was gone. And she had nothing left. The next morning. Lily woke up the next morning in an empty house. The silence was deafening. James' things were gone. The house, once full of life and laughter, now felt hollow and empty. She sat on the edge of their bed, staring at the wall, feeling numb. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, but one thing was clear, she had lost everything. The man she loved had walked out on her, taking everything, her trust, her love, and her security. But even in the midst of the pain, something else crept in, relief. It wasn't the relief of a new beginning, but rather the end of a nightmare. The years of denial, the broken promises, the emotional turmoil, all of it had come to a head, and now, there was no more pretending. It was over. Lily knew she would never be the same again. The pain of the betrayal would haunt her forever. But in this moment, there was a small seed of acceptance. She had lost everything, but somehow, she had survived. She was still standing. The days that followed James' departure were a blur. The silence in the house felt suffocating, like a weight pressing down on Lily's chest. She spent hours just sitting, staring into space, trying to come to terms with everything that had happened. The life she had known, the life she had worked so hard to build with James, was gone. And yet, in some strange way, it felt like a relief. She could no longer pretend that the perfect family they had built was real. The illusions were shattered, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Lily allowed herself to feel the full weight of the situation. She had been living in denial for so long, but now, the truth was undeniable. She had been deceived, betrayed, and left with nothing. Her emotions were a whirlwind of conflicting feelings. Anger. Sadness. Relief. Fear. And yet, amidst all the chaos, she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of calm settle over her. It was as if the storm had passed, and now she was left to pick up the pieces of her broken life. Lily knew she couldn't go back. She couldn't undo the betrayal, the lies, or the years spent trying to fix something that was never going to be fixed. But at the same time, she couldn't help but feel a deep, aching love for James. It didn't make sense. How could she still love someone who had hurt her so deeply? But there it was. The love was still there, lingering like a shadow, even though she knew he was never coming back. She spent the next few weeks sorting through their things, packing up James' clothes, and finding a way to move forward. It was difficult, painful, but she knew it had to be done. The house felt emptier with each passing day, but there was something inside her that pushed her to keep going. She had to keep going. For herself. For her children. And then there were the moments of guilt. Guilt for not seeing the signs earlier. Guilt for not confronting him sooner. Guilt for allowing herself to be deceived for so long. She questioned herself. How could she have been so blind? How could she have allowed herself to be manipulated into believing everything would be okay? But even as these thoughts swirled in her mind, she found herself accepting something she had never thought she would, that she had been complicit in her own suffering. She had allowed it to happen. She had allowed him to take everything from her. She had been so afraid of losing him, so afraid of the unknown, that she had sacrificed her own happiness, her own sense of self-worth, just to keep the facade of a perfect family intact. She hated herself for it, but she also understood. The fear of losing someone you love is powerful. It clouds your judgment, it distorts your reality. And before she could realize it, she had been swept up in the tide of her own fear, losing herself along the way. But now, she was beginning to see the truth. Slowly, painfully, she was learning to accept that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't all her fault. Maybe James was the one who had broken the promises. Maybe it wasn't her fault that he had chosen someone else, that he had walked away without a second thought. Maybe, just maybe, she deserved more than what he had given her. She couldn't change the past. She couldn't go back and make different choices. But she could choose to move forward. She could choose to heal. Lily stood in front of the mirror one morning, looking at her reflection. The woman staring back at her was different from the one who had lived in the haze of denial for so long. She was tired, yes, but there was something else in her eyes now, a quiet strength, a resolve to keep going, no matter how difficult it would be. She didn't have all the answers, and she didn't know what the future would hold. But for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of clarity. She didn't need James to be happy. She didn't need him to be whole. She could do it on her own. It was going to be hard. It was going to be lonely. But she could rebuild her life. She could find her way back to herself. Lily looked at her children, playing together in the living room. They were the light of her life, the reason she had kept going all this time. And in that moment, she made a promise to herself. She would never let anyone take her peace again. She would protect herself, protect them, and rebuild a life that was hers and hers alone. She was still hurting, yes. The betrayal still stung. But she would rise from the ashes. She would find her strength, even if it took time. And with that, she took a deep breath, wiped away the last of her tears, and walked into the next chapter of her life.